If you haven't had the bike out for a while, there are some basic safety checks you should carry out before you go for a ride. These checks are really easy for you to carry out, and they're usually known as the power checks, which stands for petrol, oil, water, electrics and rubber. So we'll run through them fairly quickly on the bike to let you see what you should be looking at to make sure the bike is safe to use. The first one, petrol, is if your bike has a petrol gauge, a fuel gauge on the dashboard, turn the ignition on, keep the bike upright and see what the gauge is showing. If you don't have a gauge, the usual method is open the tank, hold the bike up and just get a wee wiggle to see what level the fuel's at. It's not an accurate measurement at all, but you'll know at least if you have sufficient fuel to go and reach a petrol station and top it off. The other thing to check as well with your bike is if it has a manual fuel tap, make sure the fuel tap isn't on reserve when you're setting off, because that's one easy way to get caught out and run out of fuel when you're on the road. To check the oil, have a look at your handbook for the bike to find out what the level should be and how you should check it properly. On this bike, the oil filler cap is here on the crankcase. Some bikes have a dipstick attached to the cap, and you would unscrew the dipstick, lift it out, sit it back on without screwing it in, and then when you take it off again, that'll give you a reasonable level. The bike generally has to be upright before you check the oil level. Some bikes, like this one, have a sight glass on the side of the engine casing as well. There'll be an upper and lower mark, and your oil level should sit in between the two. Check again with your handbook to see if your oil level should be checked with the engine cold or after the engine's been run up to temperature. As well as your oil level, there's another fluid you should check on the bike. That's your brake fluid. If your bike has hydraulic brakes, which again most of them nowadays do, you'll have a brake fluid reservoir for the front brake and there'll be one for the rear brake. The rear brake reservoir is generally sitting down at the side of the bike, somewhere underneath the rear seat area. Again, the handbook will show you where it is, and it will have marks on it showing you upper and lower levels. Make sure it's in between them and don't let it go below. For the front brake reservoir, again, you can have this type, which is translucent and easily checked. You've got your upper and lower marks, or it may be a metal rectangular tank, and there'll be a sight glass on the side, again marked with upper and lower levels. Don't let your fluid drop between below the lower level. You'll end up with air in the brakes just when you need them. Water levels. If you have a liquid cooled bike, it's always worthwhile just having a quick look at the water level. You don't need to take the radiator cap off. Again, the bike should have an expansion tank, very similar to what you find in a car. And check that the coolant level is in between the upper and lower marks. If it's below the minimum, just top it off with the proper coolant. Again, check your handbook to find out what the coolant would be. Electrics, nice and simple. Put your ignition on, start the engine if you need to, and then just have a quick check to make sure that your headlight's working, your tail light's working, indicators are there, and importantly, check that your brake lights work from both the front brake and the back brake. A lot of people just check the front, don't think about doing the back. Make sure your lights are all working properly before you set off. Rubber. Check your tyres. Another easy one for people to miss. Put the bike on its centre stand if it has one. Check around the back tyre, make sure you don't have any nails, screws or stones or glass stuck in the tread. Check for cuts on the sidewall. Do the same with the front tyre. Check the tread depth. Again, it'll be very easy and very noticeable if your tyres are on the legal limit or worse. And then check your tyre pressures. For a bike like this, the front tyre runs at 36 psi and the rear tyre is 42. Smaller bikes can be typically 33 psi in the front and 36 in the back. Again, check your handbook, make sure you've got the right pressures, make sure your tyres are set as they should be before you set off. While you're checking your rear tyre, make sure that your chain is properly lubricated and tensioned. Hopefully you've now got a good idea of the checks you need to make sure your bike is safe and roadworthy. Enjoy your run.